welcome to the Sign Letting Podcast. I'm Connor Burke, and this is the place where all the latest goings on in the world of football, play a couple of games, and almost definitely go off on a tangent or two. I'm joined, as always, by my friend, my cousin, but most importantly, my co-host, Kieran Burke. Kieran, how are we getting on?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think we need to get a headphone user warning in there for the start of our intros. As a headphone user myself, I'm nearly deafened over here with the absolute melody.
Has the intro got you there?
It's got me, mate. It's got me. It'll be ringing through my ears trying to sleep tonight, but there's no better way to lullaby myself to sleep.
One thing I'll always say is the intro to this podcast is an actual bop.
It is a banger. I often find myself absolutely jamming along.
I'll have to send you the full version. Genuinely a tune.
Get me in there. Have you got any 10-hour loops of it?
I'll get you like a full 24-hour loop, and you can, like people that have mindfulness to help them get to sleep and stuff.
I feel like that's more kind of like Japanese torture rather than mindfulness. But,
a little bit of
I feel by the 10th loop, insanity would start to creep in. But there's only one way to find out. I'll report back next week.
Well, people do 24-hour live streams and stuff for charity and things like that. We'll do one, but it's just you in a room, and all you have is that song on loop.
Oh, I'm down.
Like a little social experiment, and we'll see what hour it takes for you to fully lose your head.
I don't give myself too long, but we'll see. Possibly I'll make an hour.
Second loop in, things getting lobbed around the room.
Smashing the room up. I'm in a straitjacket, just fucking banging my head against the wall.
Just get dragged out.
Tell you what, the viewers would be going up there.
Oh, mate, would go from 3 to 5 like that.
Be nearly doubled.
Oh,
in the space of an insanity live stream.
The dream, pal.
Mate, that 24 hours viewership figures are going up.
going through the roof if you have a very small house.
A straw hut through the roof.
Mate, straw hut. The wolf would be losing his head. He'd love that.
Oh, mate.
He'd be one viewer right on there.
Rubbing his hands together, a filthy little wolf.
Anyway, wolves aside, tiny houses aside, themes aside, should we get into the football?
We can do.
I guess, as we're here. So, we are recording this Thursday afternoon, so if we're not talking about Wolves' big 4-0 win against Man United, that is why...
I thought you said we're not talking about Wolves.
Fuck's sake.
I know you might have been referring to the big bad variety, but Wolverhampton Wanderers do also apply, so you can't talk about them. It
did genuinely take me a second to think, what the fuck were you on about then? And it was just terrible instead.
Yeah.
But yes, as you rightly say there, Kieran, Wolves aside, we've got the weekend games coming up. We've got our predictions back underway. We'll do an update next week on how we fully got on this week, but you are currently 2-1 up, Kiers. I can only draw the week if Wolves beat Man United, if Man United win, or if there's a draw, then you will win the week. But this weekend, well for you. Good for this weekend, we've got Everton and Spurs, Saturday midday kickoff to start us off.
Yeah, obviously Spurs will be full of confidence after their win yesterday. Brentford's always a bit of a tough game, especially now Tony's back, so they managed to scrape through. A bit of shithousery going on there as well. The back and forth between Mopé and Maddison was good stuff. But
he's
I did find it funny how rattled he got though.
Oh, but to be fair, Mopé's a massive shithouse. He's not doing it to your team. It's great crack.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I despise that man, but I actually this morning my feelings kind of changed a bit. But yeah, he's rattled us many times before, so he's an elite rattler himself. But I have gone 1-0 Everton actually in this one. I just think Everton at home, they like to throw up a bit of an upset every now and then. Obviously yesterday, drawing away at Fulham is an okay result. I'm sure they'll take the point there, especially being down that end of the table, but obviously now find themselves creeping into the bottom three with Luton's big win against Brighton. So I think
Yeah,
Everton will
some result that for Luton. Bloody hell.
massive result. So I think there'll be a bit of pressure on them now. And whilst they wouldn't always think, oh, we need to be beating Spurs, they're kind of getting to that point now where they need to start picking up the points.
100%.
And I just think in a home game against a so-called bigger side, they do usually throw up a bit of a result. So I'm going 1-0 Everton in that one.
Yeah, as you say, they tend to at least perform, especially at home against the bigger table teams. We've obviously felt that a few times. We felt that earlier in the season when we scraped that 1-0 win against them. So they do usually turn up. Thing with Everton is they are currently on a 5-game streak with no win. 3 losses, 2 draws. And the team that started that streak, weirdly enough, was Spurs. In December, because last month, in February. In December, Spurs started that off with a 2-1 win against Everton at home. So Everton will be wanting to turn that streak around, and what better way to do it than the team that started it, kind of thing. But I've got Spurs 3-1 here. I did have 1-1 briefly when I was thinking about it, but I think Spurs are going to sort of get a run together. Maddison seemed like he was getting up to pace more so than he was fully back in the game this week. I think surviving against Brentford, they're now in the top 4, huge for them. I think they're going to go on a little patch now, a little run to cement themselves in the top 4, and not so sure about the positioning of the top 3. Maybe it will stay as is, but I think that is the top 4 we're going to end the season with. So yeah, I've gone 3-1 Spurs on that one. Do you sort of agree with that in terms of the top 4?
Yeah, I do. As you said, I think the top 3 will be those 3, but in what order remains to be seen. I think, obviously, we'll probably speak a little bit around Arsenal-Liverpool on Sunday, although it's not in our predictions, but I think that will determine my thoughts on how that order ends up, but we'll see. We'll come on to that.
Yeah, 100%. We have been saying I've been saying for ages, but at least for a few weeks, we've both been saying how Aston Villa are going to drop off, and it seems like they're really going through that patch now. They are the next team we've got up, playing Sheffield United, a game they very much struggled in last month themselves when they scraped a draw.
Yeah, I've gone the same result actually, 1-1. I believe it was in that game. First time round. Sheffield United, obviously they're not having a great season, are they? The phrase we always use, what I always use, stone bottom. So they need something from somewhere. I just think at home, as you mentioned, Villa obviously struggled against them in the reverse fixture when they were at home. Sheffield United unlucky not to win that one, really. I can see a draw in that one. I think it'll be a cagey game. Villa, obviously not a good result for them at all in the week. Losing 3-1 at home to Newcastle. I think if they would have won that, if they'd won that, they thought, okay, we'll kind of pick back up again now. But Newcastle were just so comfortable in that game. Really was quite surprised, really, by the Villa performance. Newcastle were very good, in fairness, but Villa just didn't really have an outlet in that game. Like, they just were very much penned in their own half. Yeah. And Newcastle were just all over them, really.
They were figured out, weren't they?
They were. And you do see that when it gets to the kind of second phase of the season, if a team starts particularly well, teams figure out how to play them, which we did think was probably the case with Arsenal, although since the break we look to have worked it out a little bit, and obviously
do you think that could be a big issue for Villa as teams figuring them out now going forward?
Yeah.
Does Emery have a good plan B?
Exactly. I think Villa, I do still think they'll be up there at the end of the season, but I can't see top 4, as we've just said. We reckon the top 4 will be as is now. I still fancy them for Europa League spots.
Yeah,
I do see Newcastle making a bit of a surge second half of the season, if I'm being honest, because they had a.
I don't think they're consistent enough.
I do agree, but I think they're going to have some players coming back from injury now, and if they can pull a few results together, I can see them kind of jumping up at the table a bit. I see West Ham dropping off slightly, and they're obviously on a good run themselves, but I just think Newcastle, I don't think they'll threaten top 4, but because they're obviously a good way off at the minute, but I think they'll pull a bit.
Should we move into Newcastle then? Who do you play Luton this weekend themselves?
Yeah, so what did you have the Sheffield United Villa game?
Oh, do not say my result. I had 2-1 Villa. I think as you sort of intimated there. It's a very tight, cagey game, but I think Sheffield United have shown time and time again they don't really have enough to hold off or kill off a game, and I think a late Villa winner is in it for me.
Fair enough. Newcastle Luton then. Obviously just spoke quite a length on Newcastle. I see them winning 2-0. Luton will be absolutely full of confidence after their hammering of
bloody hell.
of Brighton. You know what? We've gone on the first half of the season about Luton holding 5 at Kenilworth. They nearly put 5 past Brighton at Kenilworth. I was waiting when I saw it was 4-0. I was like, oh, is it gonna go to 5?
What a twist that would have been.
Who would have thought we'd see the day where they scored 5 before they held 5? But brilliant performance from them. I think a result like that's been coming, maybe not against someone like Brighton, but Luton have given a real good game to, well, obviously us, when you saw us just about scrape past. They've had other big teams go to Kenilworth and really struggle.
Especially at home.
Yeah, especially at home. I think that's partly why I've gone with Newcastle 2-0. I think at St James's Park, they usually tend to, dominate. Well, maybe not in recent month or so, but they do tend to dominate at home. And I think Luton will struggle to get a foot in the game in that one. Newcastle, traditionally very strong defensively as well. As I said, a few players coming back from injury as well. So I can see Newcastle winning that comfortable enough, but it wouldn't surprise me if Luton went and got a result either. So you never know.
Yeah, I think the difficulty thing with Luton is that St James's Park factor, which a fair chunk of teams do face when they're away to Newcastle. But I was just looking here, and we were saying about Luton holding 5, and obviously the reverse nearly happening this week. Since the first 2 games of the season, when they lost 4-1 to Brighton and 3-0 to Chelsea, they've not lost a game by more than 2 goals since then, which, for what they were sort of expected to do, is a real interesting stat on Luton. And I think they could start to pull away a little bit. I think now they're starting to come together. They've been playing good football for a while. And if it does start to form, they could start to edge those couple of safer places up the table. We'll see. I don't think it's going to start this week myself. I think Newcastle are going to have a small little patch here where off the Villa game, another game at home against Luton. I've got 2-0 as well, actually, on this one.
Yeah, just on Luton, I think we touched earlier in the season about the points deduction galvanising Everton. I think the whole Tom Lockyer situation has really seemed to bring that group together, and they've got that added hunger and desire and a reason to. Obviously, there's always a reason to win games, but they've got that extra motivation now, which I think you can really see since that incident happened.
Yeah, and obviously having a hot manager helps as well.
Oh, absolutely. So
big up all the Thurston on Twitter for our old pal Rob Edwards there.
Big Rob, mate, he'll be loving it.
I can't blame him. I'm fully invested as well. I'm fully involved.
A relegation, perhaps, but the best-looking manager in the league.
Best-looking relegation you'll ever see.
Do it in style if you're going to do it.
The second he smiles, give him an extra 10 points himself. Give him Everton's 10 points you took off him.
We'll have them. And still somehow bottom of the league.
They've got a potential good month in Newcastle. I know we were saying Luton there, but they've got Luton this weekend. Then they've got Forest, who I know, tricky one recently, but a potential. Then they've got Bournemouth. And then they do have Arsenal to end the month. So hopefully they'll lose points there. But the rest of the month, they have a potential to sort of what you were saying and really stick into those European places.
I do see them going on a bit of a run now. I think they've got players back, bit of confidence after that Villa result, and I see them kicking on now.
Yeah, the way the Premier League is, they'll probably lose this weekend now, and it will just spin around. Luton themselves have Newcastle this weekend, then they have Sheffield United, then they have Man United, then they have Liverpool, then they have Villa. Oof. We were just saying there about the potential to go on a run. They might not find it's that easy.
Yeah, to be fair, they're a point out of the bottom 3 now, and obviously Forest and Everton potential for further points deduction, so they might end up safe just by way of that, really, because Sheffield United obviously right down at the bottom, and then if Everton and Forest both get 10 points deducted
They'll
or
be
whatever
flying.
it might be.
Could you imagine if Burnley got safe because of
On the
because of more points?
technicality of a legend who recommended you.
You are nothing. You're a fool. Big up, Andy Tate. But you do mention Forest there with the potential of their points deduction to come later in the season. They play Bournemouth this weekend.
Yeah. Tough one to call this. Both teams show glimpses
Yes.
of looking very good. And then similarly, they both show glimpses of being very bad. Obviously, Arsenal played Forest in the week. Always like to make it difficult for ourselves at the end.
God.
But on the whole, I think as soon as we scored that first goal, we were very comfortable. And we
were comfortable throughout. It was very dominating, but it was the fear of Arsenal this season where we had like 99.9% of the possession, and with that low block that teams have started to fit in against us, could we break it down? And they just didn't have enough to hold out against us. And as you say, we did invite them back a little bit, but there was no real danger.
Yeah, I didn't think Forest looked great in that game, I'll be honest. They never really threatened us. And obviously, as we say, it ended up to be more of a consolation in the end, although we did have a bit of a scare there, which is a similar situation of the reverse fixture for Arsenal Forest earlier in the season. But Forest, they're very up and down for me. They need to start putting a kind of patch of form together now and show some consistency. Bournemouth lost heavy at Liverpool recently, so they'll want to amend that, although they have been on a decent run themselves before that. Obviously, since they had that really poor run at the start of the season, they've looked much improved since then. I do have Bournemouth winning this one 3-2. I think both teams, although we're talking about Forest with a low block, obviously when you're playing against Arsenal, it's different.
Yeah, it's very different.
Playing Bournemouth. So I think on the whole, Forest usually quite open, and I think the same for Bournemouth as well. So I see goals in this one, but I think Bournemouth will edge it out. So I've got 3-2 Bournemouth.
Yeah, fair. I can fully back that. I've got 2-1 Bournemouth myself. The thing with Forest is, do you feel like maybe the new manager bounces over and they'll sort of settle back into how they were before, or do you think Nuno can bring them a little bit further on?
It does look that way, in all fairness, but they do have some quality in that squad. But I think you can say that about any of the teams down there. They've got the kind of flashes. I think in the end, the teams that stay up always seem to be the ones that are more of a team rather than relying on, individual quality. Like you look at Luton.
Saying about Luton, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. That they really have that togetherness, whereas they perhaps don't have individual massive quality. I think it's fair to say
some of that parts.
But exactly that. So I think Forest are in trouble, to be completely honest, especially if they do end up with a points deduction. I think with all the transfer signings they made, they do look a little bit like a group of individuals rather than a team.
They did feel that way last season, and they managed to survive by the skin of their teeth. So thanks to us, really. But we will see. Yeah, but as I say, I've got 2-1 Bournemouth there. They won 7 in a row, and then they had those tricky last 2 games against Spurs and Liverpool, which they lost. I can see them picking back up where things left off in that really good run for them. I think your mate Iriola has them performing at such a, as far as those sort of lower end table teams go, a very high level. They just seem to have pulled it all together with those 2 bigger team anomalies thrown in there. I've got a 2-1 Bournemouth win.
Yeah.
And then the last game we've got, Kiz, we're not going to call it the M23 derby because I know that Brighton and Palace fans don't like that. But it's a big game for both of those clubs this weekend, Brighton against Palace.
Yeah, so the M23 derby then.
One of your favourites.
Rattled. Brighton, obviously, big upset in the week. I know we said perhaps one of those sort of results was coming for Luton, but I wouldn't have seen that one coming against Brighton.
Yeah.
Spoke about Brighton before. They just struggle to... They go on a run of a few results, and then they just drop straight back off again. So I think they're just really struggling for consistency. Obviously, they're sat 8th in the table, level on points with 7th, only 3 points off West Ham in 6th, who, as of time of recording, do have a game in hand. But it is that frustration for Brighton that they could really be up there if they could just be a little bit more consistent. They've shown games this season where they've looked really good, but then struggled to maintain the levels throughout. Palace, big result for them in the week as well. Obviously, beating Sheffield United, they were on the ropes with that early goal conceded in the first minute, but managed to get through. Obviously, Eze, Elise doing what they do
when
best.
you have that quality.
That's the thing. I think that's the big difference for Palace, which separates them from the other teams that are kind of down in around that area. That attacking threat is just very, very good. Obviously, Eze and Elise in particular, just pure class.
Unbelievable,
I can definitely see them both, if one of them at least, if not both, moving on in the summer.
Otherwise you sort of fit into the Wilf Zaha problem a little bit. Well, obviously he did have that spell at Man United, but the bulk of his career was at Palace. There were sort of rumours every now and then. He didn't really... For Palace, he obviously did a lot, but I mean, in the grander scheme of things, he didn't do much. And you do have a danger of that when you're a player of a higher level and you're at that kind of club. With all due respect to Palace...
I was going to say that. They're a solid Prem team, but players of that quality
100%
should be sniffing in around the Champions League spots.
It's just because it's not because Palace are that bad; they are that good.
Yeah, exactly that. And there's no disrespect, as you say, to Palace. They're just another level. I think it's fair 100%. To say. So be interesting to see what happens with them. I have gone 3-1 Palace in this one.
Okay.
I just think that's going to take a toll on Brighton, the result in the week. Bit of a shock. Obviously, they've got a lot of quality in that team. Very good manager in De Zerbi, so I don't think it's going to be a longer term problem. I just think, I think a result like that is bound to have an impact. I think with Brighton, they struggle to know what their best team is because they always seem to be chopping and changing players. Like you look at Ferguson, tipped as being like the next big thing, but then he can't seem to start a game, and then he's brought on at half time in the week for Luton. Probably frustration there for him. You look at other players in and around there. That Hinshelwood was performing well, and then is getting benched. Obviously came back on in the week because I think Milner went off injured early doors. But I think with chopping and changing so much, I think that's factoring into that lack of a real rhythm for them.
Yeah.
So I think they need to try and sort that out because
they don't know their best team, do they?
Exactly. As much as it's good to have that depth and be able to rotate, the bulk of your season,
100%.
We see it every year. Teams that can play the same 11 week in, week out tend to do well. You look at Leicester in that title-winning season.
You look at title-winning teams pretty much every year. There was a bulk 11, and then you've got parts that are sort of moved out as and when they're needed, but the bulk 11 stays practically the same.
Yeah, and obviously Brighton aren't going to have aspirations of winning the league at this point of time, but
just a consistent team in general.
Yeah, just being consistent and like knowing what their best 11 is, I think is always beneficial. So I think that's an issue for them. But as I said, I have gone 3-1 Palace in this one.
Yeah, I like to sort of throw in a little statistical backup when I get my predictions in. So Brighton's last 8 games in December, they beat Brentford. And then the next 3, they drew twice and they lost 1. And then they beat Spurs 4-2. And now they've drawn 2 and they've lost 1. So I've gone 3-1 to Brighton to continue that quite aesthetically pleasing little pattern they've got running on. But I feel like we call Brighton inconsistent a lot. But really, is the consistency being quite poor? And then wins are sort of sprinkled in at the minute. And how they're sort of still within reach of Europe at this point, I'm not too sure, because it does feel like they're so incredibly inconsistent.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of trying to think where they're picking up all their points from.
Yeah,
'cause a lot of the time with Brighton, I just think underwhelming.
I think it was earlier on in the season, but
that is because of the levels they set last season as well.
Oh,
I think
definitely.
If you look in the grand context of things, they've lost big players in recent years, and perhaps they're now just levelling out as a result of that. But I think the standards they've set themselves, they want European football.
With this Brighton team, with the way they've sort of been ransacked over the years, to still be in the top 8 and fighting higher, is a huge thing for them. But as you say, with the standards they've set, they are just sort of fitting below them. Obviously, at the start of the season, we talked about them getting top 5, top 6, and they're sort of struggling in around the mid-table zone at the minute. So, as you say, it's just where standards have been set. But they're the predictions locked in, Kiers. There is other games across the weekend. You've got Man United West Ham on Sunday afternoon. How that game goes, or how teams go into that game, will be they play tonight as we record. You've got Bournemouth, and we spoke about Bournemouth against Nottingham Forest on Sunday as well. Chelsea Wolves on Sunday too. But the big game on Sunday, Arsenal against Liverpool. What's your head saying rather than your heart on this one, Kiz?
Oh, it's the only game that matters this week, I think.
Huge.
I am. I don't know whether it's blind optimism or blind faith, but I fancy 3-2 Arsenal. I do. I know we're not predicting it outright, but I just think with Salah missing, I know other players have stepped up for them. Obviously, Diaz and Jota.
I was going to say, Jota's record against us puts the absolute fear into me.
I know. But the thing is, they have other players to step up. But I just think if we have to be at our best, let's be honest. We have to be at our absolute best and hope Liverpool are just below their best for us to win, is the reality. But I think it'll be a great game. Arsenal-Liverpool's always a good game. So from a neutral point of view, it'd be a good game to watch. But obviously, we're just going to have the fear of God in us. I think we have to win. I think we have to go.
You don't even think a draw will keep us in the running?
No, I don't think so. Being 5 points behind, I know. I'm not saying, mathematically, like you look, there will still be 15 games left after that. I just think from a mentality point of view, and then obviously City then have the chance to go 5 above us as well if we end up drawing that. And then we're chasing City and Liverpool and needing slip-ups from both of them. I just think it's too much. I think if we beat Liverpool at home, you're full of confidence. You close the gap to within 2 of them. We'll still be within 3 of City if they win their game in hand. And then we've got something to really go at the rest of the season. I just think morale drops massively if we can't win that game. I think being at home, we have to win it. We have to win it. Salah's missing. Trent's injured still as well. I know Connor Bradley stepped up massively and looked unbelievable, phenomenal, in fairness. Yeah. But, again, inexperience going to the Emirates, big game. We've got to go at him. We've got to go at him. He looks great, but get Martinelli and Saka the ball, test him, get him behind 100%. Him, and see what they're about. I think we have to win it. We have to win it. If we don't win this game, going back to what we said about what we think the order of that top 3 will be come the end of the season, I think we'll be third if we draw or lose on Sunday. I just think it's too much to make up. We'd have to be absolutely perfect, and we've seen from City in particular, they'll probably be perfect as well. So there's just no room for error. Whether City even drop 5 points between now and the end of the season remains to be seen.
I think they will. You know my opinion on City and whether or not they'll.
Yeah, I think it's possible, but we need to just give ourselves as much of a chance as possible and leave as small a gap as possible, so we have the chance to capitalise where we can. So
yeah, I think league-wise, it's Liverpool's title to lose. We're chasing, but the expectations on Man City to just come good again, and I just don't think they will because of sort of everything that's come behind them. And maybe that's a bit naive considering how they've been recently, but we'll see. But yeah, this weekend, a loss is a complete disaster. Yeah. A draw, for me, a draw's not the end of the world, but it just doesn't leave any wiggle room. A win really puts us in and amongst it again. It also leaves that little bit of wiggle room when we have our inevitable March issues where obviously that will be turned on other teams, but it does leave that tiny little bit of wiggle room for a one-off result, like when we do have to go to the Etihad and things like that. It leaves that little gap that we can play with, so to speak. But it's going to all be about taking chances, Kiz.
Yeah.
The chances will be there, as we've shown time and time again. The chances will be there, but whether or not we'll take them is the big issue. And it's really reared its head, obviously, the last sort of month. Even the other day, when we were playing Nottingham Forest, there were chances there that was the worry. A lot of possession, chances. would we take them? Unfortunately, we ended up taking a couple. But that's the thing. Liverpool, you don't take chances against them, and they're going to make you rue them. Sort of when we played them at Anfield, and there was a bit of that issue where there was chances there that we didn't take, and it finished 1-1. And
Yeah. I think it's fair to say with Liverpool, no matter how well you defend, they're probably going to score at least a goal. So
even when
you have
we were
to take the chances.
Even when we were infinitely the better team at the Emirates last season, it still took a late Saka penalty to win that game.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in terms of for the neutral, going back to that point, it's always a good game.
Yeah.
There's none of the low block nonsense that we see every week against us.
And that sort of did help us when we went to Anfield. It's going to be a very much more open game, and that really does suit us.
The thing is, Liverpool trust themselves to go toe-to-toe, which is shown to be a valid
that's understandable
way to approach games for them, with them being top. But it does give us that bit more freedom that we're used to, where Saka and Martinelli have a bit more space, and arguably they've got there are players with the most quality. You've got Odegaard able to get on the ball a bit more, but then obviously you've got to be wary in the transition where Liverpool can absolutely kill teams. So I'm looking forward to it at the minute. Come Sunday, I'll probably just be fearing for my life. But at the minute, I'm looking forward to it. But we will see.
Yeah, we'll check in next week with our predictions, with how Arsenal have got on, and obviously with the FPL as well. We'll check back in on how the week's gone there.
Yeah.
So that's everything for this coming weekend, sorted and locked in. Up next, we have a return of the bracket, where we discuss our worst commentators. So up next, we have a return of the bracket. So in the bracket, myself and Kieran will pick a category, and then we'll both pick 4 choices each on that category to place into the bracket, which will be a knockout tournament format to decide the winner of the chosen category. This week's category is one that we actually discussed, Kiers, sort of late last year, and it's just sort of reared its head again, and it's worst football commentators, most specifically the co-commentators. So we're not talking about pundits, we're not talking about like your Darren Fletchers, we're talking about co-commentators.
Yeah. Interestingly, we've both selected 1 or 2 ex-Arsenal players as well, so we're proving there's no bias around.
Yeah, that's very nice. If there's no bias this week, so do you want to share your 4 picks?
Yep. So my 4 picks are in order as well. I've gone Kieran Carney,
Joe Barton would be so proud.
Martin Keown, Jermaine Genius, and Alan Smith.
Yes, and to Joey Barton's both delight and annoyance, there is only 1 woman and 7 men, but disgraceful. My 4 picks are Andy Townsend, Lee Dixon, Glenn Hoddle, and Steve McManaman. So we'll start off, Keir. Should we start off with Andy Townsend against Alan Smith?
Let's do it.
Let's start with that. So Andy Townsend. Now, I've always disliked Andy Townsend. He's my pick, and he's just an incredibly boring commentator. But where he came back into my life and into my hatred was while I was in Australia, and I had Optus Sports, which is who carry the Premier League out in Australia. And in at least every big game, but it felt like every game I watched, somehow he'd be on the 12:30, the 3 o'clock, the 5:30. He was everywhere. His incessant, dull dronings, almost always wrong on what he says, almost always such basic football man speak and language and behaviour, and just the sort of co-commentator drivel that makes me want to drive my head into a wall.
Big fan.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. To be fair, I think where you're saying with obviously him on the Optus Sport stuff, I think perhaps because I don't see him as much nowadays, there's not quite as much hatred there, just because it's like obviously not being exposed to him as much. Obviously, I had Alan Smith down as my pick here. Similar reasons, really. I just feel like whenever he's commentating, he doesn't actually add anything.
Yeah,
it's just like he's talking for the sake of talking when he says anything on a point, or he'll just repeat what the other commentators just said, and it's just like, boss, you're not actually adding any input to this game here. And he just like he's one of those. You don't feel like he's done any research on the game at all.
He's just rocked up.
like he's just rocked up for vibes. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of him, but I'm happy we go Andy Townsend on this one. Make it a nice, easy start. Yeah, I'd agree with all the points you made there. I
The
think
last,
Alan Smith's just perhaps a slightly watered down version.
yeah, I can, yeah. As you say, just it doesn't add much. He's basically there, and that's a bit more inoffensive. I feel like you don't notice Alan Smith as much as you quite viscerally notice Andy Townsend.
Yeah,
but the last one I'll say on Andy Townsend as well is he is part of the most overrated commentary duo. That old Champions League ITV duo of Clive Tilsley and Andy Townsend. For me, but I watched that growing up. I'm well aware of what that commentary team was. The most overrated commentary team for me.
It's all about Ali McCoist, mate.
I'll take no slander on Ali McCoist, a top boy. The best thing with Ali McCoist is sort of similar to Alan Smith. It doesn't feel like he does research, but unlike Alan Smith, it just feels like he knows.
Yeah. He's got the background knowledge, and he's pure personality as well.
100%.
So he adds that element as well. If you're not going to have the knowledge, at least you're bringing something to the table. And to be fair, it's not just personality with Ali McCoist, but that is a big factor. He's just a likeable guy.
I think what will come up time and time again with all 8 of these picks is boring.
Yeah.
There's no personality about them. There's no atmosphere in the way that they speak. It's very dull and droll, and that's the one thing, regardless of your opinion of Ali McCoist, like the way he is, the one thing you can't say is he's boring and doesn't have a personality. Like, even if you weren't an Ali McCoist fan, he very clearly, you notice him. Yeah. He's very out there, and he bloody loves football, and that's the sort of thing that's very clear and not always clear with the other picks we've got.
Yeah.
But it's not about best commentators or our favourite commentators. It is about the worst. And so we'll get into another 2. Really, I think this could be the boring derby, this. When you've got all of them, I think the biggest complaints about both of these 2, Lee Dixon and Jermaine Genius.
Jesus.
Oh, my God. Sorry, say that again?
I'm sure they've been on a few games together as well. Is it World Cup coverage, maybe? I'm sure I recall
it's very possible
to sit through listening to both of them at once, and it wasn't fun.
So boring, they'd put an insomniac to sleep.
Oh, God, yeah. This one could go either way. Going back to, obviously, Arsenal picks, as much as I liked Lee Dixon, he's just... Yeah. I mean, I'll let you go for your Lee Dixon pick. But yeah.
As we say there, when you're so boring that the company that hires you has to bring in another commentator for one of your biggest games because people don't like you commentating, that's an issue. Like the World Cup final, they have drafted Ali McCoist. They'd already allocated it to Lee Dixon, you're commentating the final, so he's got to be there. But they bring in Ali McCoist because people like Ali McCoist more for all the reasons we said before. That has to be a fucking hit to your ego. That people this fella's terrible. Well, we can't take him off, but we can put someone you actually like on. That.
Yeah.
And he is still ITV's number 1 co-commentator with Sam Matterface, who, if we're talking just commentators, then not great either. But this isn't the time nor the debate. But Lee Dixon, talking to people that add 0 to a conversation, talking to people that have negative personality. His voice doesn't go above 2 octaves. There could be a goal. Oh, that was a goal. Yeah, they passed it around there. Yep. Lovely. Lee, that was the Maradona goal in 1986 World Cup. What are you talking about? Yeah, just killed me. But I'll let you go for Jermaine Genius here, but another incredibly dull man.
If he wasn't one of the only Spurs representatives in the media, he wouldn't be anywhere near any football, anything to do with football.
Point.
And the problem is, you see elements of bias, of course, from ex-players because, they've got that underlying love for a team. You see it with Neville and Carragher, and they bring that in, but they do it in a way where they kind of bring in the knowledge and it's a fair judgment of a game and they do the good analysis. But Jermaine Genius is just a Spurs fan that sat on a panel and adds nothing else. It's just when when he's on co-commentary, and it is often for Spurs games, I hear him on, or I know we're not talking about punditry, but you usually see him.
Yeah, that's the thing that might save him is I don't feel like he's much a commentator anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
I tell you where he is quite a good fit. He's quite a good fit on the One Show because that's that's the boring man's exciting TV show. So
yeah, but I just think I think usually you tend to see him on co-coms for like an FA Cup game, and he's always on it if Spurs are involved, and he's just awful. And as I say, all he really does is bring a Spurs perspective. So probably it stops Spurs fans giving out there's no Spurs representative.
I don't think they like him either.
Well, there you go. That says it all, really, I guess. Bang average player, bang average, below average co-commentator. I don't really like him, and it's not really even the fact he played for Spurs. Goes back to the boring point, adds nothing, and is just overly biased in anything that he says, which just makes what he says irrelevant. So,
you know, the one thing you notice on here is Jermaine Genius employed by TNT Sports. Karen Carney, long term, was employed by TNT Sports, but she's at Sky now. Steve McManaman, TNT. Martin Keown, TNT. Glenn Hoddle, TNT.
Is Karen Carney Sky now? Because the Arsenal game was on BT or TNT the other night, and I'm sure she was on.
No, Lucy Ward was on. I like Lucy Ward. I think she's a very good. She was who was on co-coms for the Arsenal game. I'm a big Lucy Ward fan. She was also on.
No, but did Karen Carney not do some of the post-match punditry? I saw her interview Arteta.
Maybe
she was in the panel. Anyway, yeah, but I know what you're saying. It is literally, and it's been a massively highlighted point by I think all football fans that it's a well-known fact the TNT punditry, co-coms, whatever you want to say, is awful.
Yeah,
genuinely awful.
All right, there's redeeming factors about Sky, and they have a couple, I think, poor commentators sort of sprinkled in, but I say they're 80% solid.
Yeah.
ITV usually have decent pundits, but they have Lee Dixon on co-coms. BBC are sort of a mix and mash, like reliable pundits. Depends who you've got on co-coms. It's sort of 50-50, really. Maybe a little bit less of Danny Murphy, he was an honourable mention in this one.
Yeah.
But Martin Keown's usually about there as well for a BBC. That's where he commentates more, isn't it, Martin Keown? Whereas he pundits more on TNT.
Yeah.
But where we lead, we've got to make a decision here, kids. Where are we leading? Lee Dixon or Jermaine Genius?
Personally, I'm leaning more towards Jermaine Genius, which perhaps no surprise because he was my pick. But to be honest, they're both awful. Let's be honest.
It's a close one, but I'm happy to back you on Genius.
I feel like Dixon, if anything, is more anti-Arsenal in his punditry. So that's perhaps a redeeming quality in the bigger picture that he doesn't bring bias or loyalties into his crappy punditry. But I feel like Genius is pure. It's just like
literally all he has.
Spurs. Yeah. So that's the one thing about Dixon you'd say as a neutral, which does actually annoy me. With some of the stuff he comes out about Arsenal, but we can't really bring that into it. Yeah. As I say, I'm leaning more towards Genius myself, but I'd be happy with either because I think they're both awful.
The Lee Dixon sort of anti-bias thing, though, is similar to Genius. One of the main reasons he's on there, especially for Arsenal games, he used to play for Arsenal and he just chats shit.
Yeah, I know.
So that's where that gets annoying. But I'll back you on Genius, I think, for all the reasons mentioned. And outside of football, he is also in your face a lot more. He does a lot more like presenting and things. He did that weird like teen focused match of the day thing that then got cancelled. He obviously does the One Show. He presents, he pundits, he commentates. He's like the Swiss Army knife of being shit.
Jack of all trades, but shit at all of the trades.
So Genius is through there. We'll jump over now to another two big contests. It's I tell you what this isn't, kids. There's no easy winners in any of these.
There's not. There's some real awful battles going on.
But now we've got Karen Carney against Steve McManaman.
Yeah. Karen Carney. What do I say?
She's terrible.
She's just awful. She's just awful. She just seems like she's never watched a game of football before. Like some of the stuff she comes out with I just find quite astonishing. Um, adds no real insight into facts. Seems to just like jump when she's like on with someone else. She just seems to like leapfrog on the back of whatever they say, and just try and say it
Yeah,
in
but like what
another
you're saying
way
about Alan
without
Smith, yeah.
without really adding any insight. And I know this is co-commentary solely, but when she does some of the punditry stuff,
Oh,
it's
I feel like the punditry is another discussion, maybe a discussion for another time, because
yeah.
there's a lot you can talk about on
But yeah,
pundits.
it's dreadful. It's
Danny Murphy,
dreadful.
we're coming for you.
Yeah. But yeah, Karen can't like whenever she's on a game as a co-com, I like literally
She used to
it
always put
does
on our
annoy me
Europa games, didn't she?
all the time. I
Oh
think
my
that's
God.
where the main. Perhaps I tie the two in together, which is why I've got a bit more hatred for it, because it reminds me of Europa League times. Same reminds me as if it wasn't just last season.
Back in the day.
But yeah, she was awful on those games. I think you'd agree. Like some of the drivel she'd come out with was just
Yeah.
dreadful. So I think she's my ultimate co-com pick for like when she's on a game, I'll like audibly sigh.
Well,
'Cause
she's your number one seed for a reason.
she is my number one seed. So yeah, what more needs to be said? She's awful.
Yeah. So, yeah, she is just a poor co-com, a poor pundit. Not good enough, really. Like the other seven we mentioned here, who should all be sacked with immediate effect. She's another one of them. But Steve McManaman, I hate his voice. I hate every point that he makes. We talk about bias. Oh my God. Some of the worst one of the worst on bias pundits there is. Because you talk about Karen Carney, like sometimes just doesn't make sense or doesn't seem like she watches games. I feel like McManaman just rocks up and thinks, oh yeah, Liverpool should win this game because I used to play for Liverpool.
Yeah.
And that's
and the thing
that's
is,
the extent of his research.
The funny thing is, we speak about bringing personality in. I feel like McManaman brings his personality in, but his personality is to be a cocky, arrogant twat. So it's probably best he didn't bring it in.
Yeah, definitely. Some people should leave their personality at the door. Like, I think if he was just boring, then he'd be a better commentator.
Yeah.
He might avoid this list.
Annoying as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, when he tries to make jokes or like pal around with Fletch, and it's like, mate, if I had a gun in this house.
The funny thing is, you can see in their faces sometimes they're a bit like, who's invited this lad?
Yeah, it's like when you meet up with your mate, but he's brought his mate with him.
Yeah. Like if McManaman was up against anyone else, I'd fully back him. Like when I saw him in your list, I was like, that's a very good shout, but I just can't see past Karen Carney.
Yeah, no, I can fully understand that. I don't think she's my number one pick, but she's definitely up there. So I can fully back her winning this contest. So up next, Kears, the last of the quarterfinals. We've got Martin Keown, Glenn Hoddle.
Yeah, I'll start on Keown. We've spoke about not being biased, picking Arsenal players. He's just so monotone in everything he says. You mentioned, I can't remember who it was, but Lee Dixon, I think, if someone scores a goal.
Yes.
There's just no reaction. Even when it's Arsenal.
What were they teaching them, Arsenal defenders? Honestly?
That's what I'm just thinking. The life was sucked out of them in that era, playing for Arsenal.
Bloody George Graham. Boring Arsenal for a reason.
Yeah, well, there you go. We won 1-0 every week for a reason. It's just... But, yeah, he's just... Again, I think he tries too hard to be anti-Arsenal.
Yeah,
to try and not be biased, but... Obviously, not just focusing on Arsenal in general, adds very little, very boring, perhaps one of the most boring out there. Just, like nothing seems to get him excited. He seems like he doesn't even like football when I hear him on co-coms. So it's just like, mate, if you don't want to be there, just
go home.
Do something else. Doesn't add anything, very boring, dull. And that's it really.
That's the word that's been repeated so often. We're quite simple people, really. Just don't be boring as shit, don't be Steve McManaman.
Yeah,
that's all we ask. Or don't believe Glenn Hoddle. Talking of the Arsenal commentary, I think it was Arsenal. He was on the other night, or he was on a game. Maybe it was the games yesterday on Wednesday night. But he was on a game this week that had me banging my head against the wall. I think it was last night. I think it was the Spurs game yesterday. It's Brentford.
Yeah.
And he was dreadful. He had me like every time he spoke, it was another load of drivel. Like for someone that was a very good player, and B, a manager at a relatively successful, obviously managed England, so a relatively successful level. I don't think he's ever watched a game of football in his entire life, or definitely not since 1999. Like we talk about like the classic football man, and it's like stupid drivel about VAR. And he was saying something like, "Oh, back in my day, we could celebrate and not look over our shoulder at VAR," or another one of those classic things that they always mention the flag being up and why does he put the flag up so late? It's like, mate, there's such clear like that's one thing that really winds me up, and I think Hoddle is the metamorphosis of this, where it's people that mention rules, especially the flag one. The flag one really gets on my goat, but they mention things that are there for a very clear reason, and they're willfully ignorant about it.
Yeah, it's refusal to move with the times and
100%.
just being set. He's too stubborn.
Send him to Richard Keys and Andy Gray at Be and be rid of him. He'd fit in there like an absolute glove.
Oh, he would, yeah. He would. Get him over there.
Yeah. But yeah, so what we're saying there, I'm quite adamant on Hoddle on this one.
I'd go Hoddle, to be completely honest. Keown's boring, but there's perhaps less I actively dislike about him. Yeah. Whereas Hoddle, for all the points you said, is just,
Yeah. I'm also, I don't know if you like this, so we'll get straight to the semis. I'm also pushing Hoddle over Carney here. I think Carney's not great, but Hoddle takes more away. I feel like you can almost tune Kieran Carney out a little bit, where Hoddle is so in-your-face shit that he takes it for me.
If we were talking punditry as well, I'd have to
punditry as well,
Carney.
I think it's yeah.
But, I think what you're saying, with co-coms, you perhaps... Yeah, Hoddle's a bit more in your face. Solely co-coms, I'm happy we go Hoddle, but I think as a pundit and as someone on football as a whole, I think Carney's my number one shit
punditry,
list.
I think the reverse is true, where Hoddle seems to fade in a bit more. He's a bit more in your face when he's on co-coms, whereas you don't notice him as much on punditry. He's able to sort of fade in a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. I also think Rio Ferdinand's a terrible pundit, but as we say, pundits are another day. So Glenn Hoddle is in the final here. The next contest, Andy Townsend and Jermaine Genus.
No, that's a pairing, that is. Again, I feel like Genus, perhaps his punditry annoys me slightly more, but then saying that, he's always seems to be co-coms on in particular FA Cup, but I think your point's relevant. Perhaps he's on less co-coms nowadays.
Yeah, do you think that saves him?
Possibly, but then if we're just analysing who the worst co-commentator is, exactly, and you talk about Optus Sport, so perhaps less, your likes, your Skies, your BTs. It's a close one, to be honest. I think Genus annoys me more as a co-commentator, but
they're both sort of out of sight, out of mind for the most part. So I'm happy to put Jermaine in the final.
I'd edge Genus on that one, I think.
It's actually two ex-Spurs players. We're talking about a lack of bias. It's two ex-Spurs in the final.
Well, it was inevitable, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. Are we happy to agree on Glenn Hoddle here?
Yeah, I think Hoddle's the outright winner. Mixture of a few different things. Stubbornness, lack of ball knowledge, bias.
Yeah.
It's just all blended into one.
He's the embodiment of the football man. He's the over 50s fellow in the pub who's like, oh, why don't they just clear it these days? It's one of those kind of situations. So,
and it's his opinion is right.
Exactly one of them. I can imagine him being bald with a pint. Awful stuff. So congratulations, Glenn. You are the worst commentator in football. What a prize for him.
Congratulations. Send us a message to get your award. I'm sure you're going to be a big fan of the show.
So that's the show for another week. Cheers, as always. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for listening. Once again, this is the best show for people that can only count to 3, the Side Netting Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good one. Goodbye.